been at, I'll start again on that one then. So the Sentencing Project is a research and advocacy organization that for the last 30 years has been at the forefront of both advocacy and research around our nation's carceral issues, really sort of putting the numbers and the damage that the millions of people who are currently in prisons and jails, what that actually looks like and what cost that's actually having to our communities. I was fortunate enough to join the Sentencing Project almost 2 years ago, coming from ACLU National, to work on the campaign to end life imprisonment. And I work in all 50 states with the goal of passing legislation that will allow for second chances, decarceration, and the undoing of the laws that have led to our problem with mass incarceration.
Okay. So with respect to second look legislation, what does that mean? Who would it affect? Yeah, who would it affect?
Well, second look legislation is legislation designed for sentence reduction for everyone as the Sentencing Project writes bills. We've been partnering with the National Association of Defense Lawyers and using their model second look legislation to retrofit it specifically for each state. So for example, in a state like Michigan, we have a second look bill that would allow everyone to apply for resentencing after 10 years if the commission of their offense happened under the age of 26, and after 15 years if the commission of their offense happened over 26. Now, 10 and 15 years of your life is an extremely long time. But what the data tells us is that Michigan has one of the largest LWOP populations in the country. It has one of the largest aging populations in the country. And 40% of its prison population was convicted under the age of 26, which is a massive outlier in the country. And so this bill, as it's crafted, would allow for very significant numbers of people to be reviewed, people who most certainly have shown themselves to be rehabilitated. And I think also in a lot of instances, cases where there's a massive question as to whether or not they should have been incarcerated in the first place.
What do you often see that makes you challenge whether someone should be there or not? We often think of people in prison as with this very general approach is they need to be there. They need to be there for us to be safe out here. What are you seeing in there that makes it relevant if someone is under the age of 26 or above the age of 26 when they get convicted of a crime?
Well, so I always think that, I guess what the data shows us is that we really failed a lot of these kids first. We're looking at rising prices of almost everything. We are looking at a society that has really let young people down. But specific to the legal system, and again, I'll turn to Michigan, the state I know that you're in, Kyle. The public defender service in Michigan was almost non-existent up until 5 years ago. We were looking at a criminal legal system that was completely out of balance and completely out of whack. Hunter Parnell, who has a fabulous podcast, which I will actually be on tomorrow, called Defenseless, has a fabulous segment on the Michigan public defender history. And what he shares and what we know is that there was a time where there was one public defender covering 30 courtrooms. That is completely unconstitutional, and it leads to cases being I mean, I don't even know what word I would use for that. It leads to basically conviction without anything on the other side of it. No representation for somebody accused in some cases of a serious crime. And so the ACLU of Michigan sued, and now the state is working on building out a public defense structure. But we basically had people being sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, which comes with fewer appeals than the death penalty. with Michigan being one of its top users in the country, being placed into that situation where from beginning to end, they were let down by the system. And so that in and of itself would require us, in the name of justice, to conduct reviews. And that's before you get into individual cases like our friend Susan Brown's, where a woman defending herself after she's been stabbed in her pregnant stomach and killing the person who did that is serving a life without the possibility of parole sentence. But that was also an instance where we had an initial mistrial and then a secondary trial with public defense, which, as I've explained, and absolutely no knock to the public defenders, they were asked to do the impossible. She ended up where she is. And so things like second look are a necessary, very initial first step to address and reverse those harms.
Are there safeguards in second look that ensure that people who are dangerous are not prematurely let out?
Well, absolutely. But first, I want to sort of challenge this notion about danger. One of my now good friends, Dr. Robert Kinshriff, who's the executive director of Harvard Law Brain and Behavior, who has spent most of his career as a forensic psychologist conducting risk assessments for people who are currently incarcerated. And he and I have done some work together on solitary confinement. Prison is not a safe place by and large. This is not a place for rehabilitation. This is certainly not a place for people who've experienced trauma, which is almost everyone in prison. This is certainly not the place to recover your physical health. I think it's even less of a place to recover your mental health. And so the concept of dangerousness in and of itself, one moment in time doesn't make a person inherently psychopathic. That's like a very different standard that quite frequently we really don't bother to nuance. So when people have committed offenses, even serious offenses, what we know is that through brain science, what we know is that criminologically, the rates of people who commit offenses goes down with age. As you mature, as your brain develops, as you learn new and different ways to cope with the stresses that you're under, your chances of offending in any way become less and less. For people who have served extreme sentences in prison, the recidivism rates are exceedingly low. So the people that we're talking about that would be offered this second chance are, from a risk assessment standpoint, not dangerous people. But I understand that people have preconceptions about that, and they don't spend their time with their nose in a book like me and my friends do. So this bill does have safeguards. First, you would have to pass the ruling of a judge who would have to agree to resentence you. And then you would have to go before the parole board. Now, there are a whole host of problems with parole boards in general, and the standards that they judge folks. And then also, I mean, very often, depending on the state, the expertise of the people who sit on that parole board. Chris Christie appointed his chauffeur to the parole board of New Jersey. That is a true story. So who sits on parole boards is very much a question, and their level of expertise is very much a question. And this is something, as I progress my campaign, I'll be working to address, but I know there are many advocates across the country that are sort of already on the job on that one.
In a state like Michigan, especially, I would imagine you're going to run into some ideological resistance when you're trying to get a bill passed that benefits prisoners in any way. Do you anticipate, or have you already experienced some of that resistance, ideological or logistical?
Well, I mean, from a logistical standpoint, anything to do with the court system is cumbersome. So we have had to look very closely at how we are actually going to do this from a practical standpoint. Applications that are accessible to everyone. A standard of legal protection that is accessible to everyone. who gets to go first, second, and third through the court system based on the level of risk that they're currently under. Michigan, as I said, has a very large aging population. Like many prisons, it has people who are severely physically or mentally ill. But, you know, a person like Teresa Dunlap, you know, she has, I believe, stage 3 or 4 cancer. She is, I believe, the second longest serving woman in the Michigan Department of Corrections. I do believe she has served over 50 years. She was secretary to the warden for 13 of those years. And getting medical, you know, parole for her has been impossible thus far. And so from an ideological standpoint, I think Michigan has reached sort of a crossroads. And so the level of resistance that I'm seeing is how we're going to do this, not whether we should do this. Even in talking to legislators who are former sheriffs, you know, they've said to me that they've seen cases where they feel that people were over-sentenced. They have a different understanding of domestic violence situations, like our friend Susan Brown found herself in, from when they started their career as a sheriff to what they felt when they ended their career as a sheriff and moved to the legislature. Thus far, much to the credit of Michigan's legislators, I have found them thus far to be very open and very reasonable in these discussions, even though I do think many people have that initial knee-jerk reaction. But fairly quickly into the conversation, they've seen the reasonableness of this, and I'm very much hoping for success in Michigan.
Thank you. For the people who aren't in Michigan, who may have never heard of second look legislation, how can they show support or become involved with moving things in their state in a direction that supports second look legislation?
Well, the Sentencing Project is now involved in second look bills in a multitude of states. And very frequently, we lend our legal and research expertise to states and help people write bills. Or if they already have a bill in place that aligns with our values, I will come in and offer research support, communication support. So I guess the first thing I'll say is you can reach out to me at Bailey, Bailey, at sentencingproject.org if you need help in your state with second look legislation. But what I would encourage folks to do is that if they are believers in second chances, if they are believers in forgiveness, if they are believers in redemption, then they should reach out to me so we can discuss what we can do for these people who've been left behind. I would also encourage them to get involved with advocates in their state. Bring this research and this concept up to them. See if it's something that they're interested in. And again, we have partners all across the country. We hold an all-state meeting every month, and folks are welcome to join us if they are interested in advocating on these issues. So I can't speak for every other organization out there, but they're certainly welcome at my home.
Thanks, Alex. I want to open the floor up for others who have questions for you. I imagine that some people may. Susan Brown's actually going to be joining us tonight here around 7:30, so I'm hoping you'll stick around for that if we can keep you here.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the information so far. Does anyone have questions that they'd like to propose? Hey, Blue.
Hi, my name is Blue. I'm from New York. I'm currently in Ohio, and justice reform has been something I've spent a lot of time looking into and wondering how I can get involved in the future. I think it's like one of the most pressing issues at hand, especially in America. And I think that I've had a lot of conversations with people where they give me the classic, like, oh, what about these people? Oh, these people are dangerous, which you mentioned. And my question for you would be about abolition in relationship to reform. Like, do you think that like prison as we know it, do we think that second look legislation is kind of on the road to abolition of prison as we know it, or is it kind of a different route that takes things down the reform path, because people have been championing the reform path, and we hit a lot of snags, and then recently it's become a more popular vocal conversation about just complete restructuring of the justice system. So my question in more concise terms would be, what part of the latter is second look legislation?
Legislation, yeah.
Legislation?
Yeah.
And what might that lead to, and for skeptics, what might I say to a skeptic of that kind of path?
Yeah, absolutely. So to be clear about my personal position, and this is not me representing my employer, this is me speaking personally as Alexandra Bailey. A policing system born out of catching slaves and a prison system born out of slavery, and in some cases, the continuance of it. Actually, I shouldn't say in some cases, in all cases. My family's originally from Tunica, Louisiana, and I have a loved one at Angola prison, which is a prison quite literally on a plantation. So the place where my family was once owned is a place where my family is still owned. And that is something that that drives me on to this day, and probably always will. The fact that that's even a possibility in 2022 shocks the conscience. So for me, I do believe that this system needs to go back to the drawing board for a rewrite. These are policies that we have sunk hundreds of years and billions of dollars per year into. To say that we have given this system the college try, I think is more than fair. And to say that this is a failed policy, I also think is more than fair. However, day to day, I live in the real world of state legislatures where I have to deal with equal representation of people who do not agree with me. And that democracy is also something that I believe in, because there's one thing that I truly know, and this is like a rallying cry for all of us. If we do not fundamentally change people's hearts and minds, it doesn't matter what policy we ever pass, it will not be safe. This is fundamental societal organizer work beyond what I will pass in any given legislative year. So I consider this, or the way that I always put this is I call it the swords and the shields. The swords are really what's going to give us that bedrock fundamental change. Those are the difficult conversations. Those are bringing communities that are at loggerheads together. That is the hard work of societal change. But year to year, we have to put up a shield so more people don't get sucked into this system, and that people have a second chance at life who are already in this system. And I split my life between shielding what I do, when I'm in a legislature, and sorting, which, is when I'm out teaching anti-racism, when I'm out in community, when I'm organizing, when we're pulling voices from people on the outside, on the inside to the outside, all of those things. So I think the worst thing the movement does is work against each other. I think that there are the people who need to go out there and sword, and I think that there are the people who need to shield. Now, I have friends who are not organizers, they're social workers, right? And I think that they're important too. They're like, well, you uphold the system. I'm like, people still need to eat 3 times a day. So I think that I don't see these two things necessarily as having to be against each other. I think you just need to pick the side of the fight that you are best suited to. And in terms of the 2 states that you're from, Blue, you picked two hella states. The good news is that we have 3 bills that the Sentencing Project is running in New York. One is a second look bill. So if you have a pen, these are real nice and easy. We have Senate Bill 7873, Senate Bill 7871, and Senate Bill 7872. These bills do three things. One is a full repeal of mandatory minimums. The other is a second look bill, universal at 10 years or 50% of your sentence. It is one of the more aggressive bills in the country. And the third is the establishment of good time, which New York is unbelievably behind on. They have fewer credits than Alabama. Yes, things are happening in Massachusetts. The Sentencing Project has resentencing style bills in 5 of the 6 New England states. And the state of Ohio, boy, is that a toughie. But if you are looking to get in touch with advocates there, I actually was just on a great panel with David Singleton, and who's a phenomenal man, who's a public defender, who has set up his own nonprofits and works with Gideon's Promise, which basically creates strong defense systems around the country. There are a lot of fabulous Ohio advocates, particularly around death penalty work, which I'd be happy to connect you with. And the way I get sucked into new states is usually when I meet people like you who go, well, what about this state? So always be out there and talking. But does that answer your question, Blue?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a winding question, so it warrants a winding answer, and the road to that kind of goal is not simple. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing and you coming to this talk tonight. You're really offering a lot of important and new and vital info filled with, I'm a little not wording myself correctly.
No, it's okay. It's later in the evening. There's a quote that I live by. It's not my job to finish the work, but I am not permitted to abandon it. I don't think that anything that I offer in this life is going to be the be all end all, but I am definitely going to have put my shoulder to the wheel.
With that, Ms. Bailey, I've got a call from Susan Brown. We've got her for a few minutes.
Susan!
There's no better conversation to be a part of, or no more relevant than Second Look, because I feel like Susan's one of those people who's an obvious example of why we need Second Look legislation as a last resort, since so many of our other checks and balances along the way fail. So I want to give Susan just a moment to introduce herself to those who might not know her. If you'll speak for maybe 2 to 3 minutes, Susan, and then I'm going to go back to Alex to maybe share some insight on what you add, please.
No problem. I'll speak really quickly. I can take the whole 2 minutes about talking about me. Isn't that right, Alexandra?
So good to see you, Susan.
Likewise. It's always an honor to be any place you are and to be able to represent. Okay, my name is Susan Brown, and I am currently incarcerated in, where am I at? Williams, Huron Valley in Michigan. I have been incarcerated for my 20th calendar year, in which I was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. You can feel free to Google me to find out more about my story, so I won't go into those aspects. But I did want to touch on what Second Look means to me and some of the thoughts that I had about it. So very quickly, I want people to understand that in prison, one tends to live in the future, a future of which we wish things could happen. Second Look is no futuristic fairy tale. Second Look is an unrealistic dream, absolutely not. It is not just hope and a desire of a much needed opportunity. It is a plausible, secure, safeguarded opportunity. An opportunity for individuals to represent a cascade of rehabilitation. An opportunity to present mitigating circumstances unseen in the judicial system. An opportunity much needed to view an individual in a humanistic manner. Second Look is progress, people. Progress of justice. which will bring prosperity to society. I want people to understand that prison has a surefire way of generating a devastating sadness. A sadness that can penetrate the tenacity of even the strongest individual. To not survive, but thrive in a modern day slavery deserves the opportunity for a second look. I believe I'm an example as to why. I believe DeMille X. Deuce is an example. Robert Greathouse is an example. Jamie Mead is an example, along with so many countless others that are truly an example. And Alexandra Bailey has brought this to the table, along with countless others.
Well, I can get the hell off the call. You don't need me, Kyle. We got Susan. I am not needed here anymore.
I was thinking the same thing, except I am the host. It hit me. I was like, if I bail, then it might kick us out. Now, those were brilliant points brought up, Susan. And your case is, as I was just saying, a very conspicuous example. I don't think I even need to know the details as a first listener to you to recognize that, hey, this is, if this person's been in prison for 20 years, we need to rethink 20-year sentences. It just doesn't make sense for us to overlook the growth and the transformation that everyone can have access to while they're in prison. And then for those like you who make it, I think it's a great face and story for a lot of people who really can't speak for themselves yet.
The day that Susan receives a second look will be the proudest of my life and career.
I actually met Susan after speaking to you. For those of you who don't know, Alexandra Bailey was the first person who I ever interviewed. And you mentioned Susan Brown there as well as a few other prisoners. And I'm curious, well, I would love for you to elaborate for those who don't have connections with someone on the inside, what it is that you find amongst the people who you're advocating for that makes you so certain that you're fighting the right fight.
I'm going to try not to get emotional right now. So Susan and I, the first time we talked, we pretty much became friends. My birthday was about a month ago. And Susan, my friends were throwing me an end prison and unicorn themed party, okay? Because I'm like 12 underneath it all. And Susan crochets little unicorns to go on top of pens for us at our office. I have a bunch of unicorn pens that she made in a place that doesn't feed her properly. That is the height of kindness, of decency, of everything that we ask of good citizens in our society. So in addition to being unbelievably smart and talented, she's an excellent mother. And I watch her be a mother from behind bars, and women behind bars with children is its own issue. And we have many reports on it, but it's just another reason why we need second look, why we need these decarceral measures. Jamie Mead is getting a master's degree from the Chicago Theological Seminary. And I spoke to the heads of that program. And I said, I just want to ask you, like, why would you go through all the rigmarole of MDOC compliance? There's no shortage of people who apply to your program. You're one of the most prestigious in the country. And they said, when we met Jamie, how could we not? So for me, the question isn't like, are they worthy? I think the question is, how could we not give people who've done this in these circumstances a second chance?
Agreed. I love that answer. We're coming up on about a minute left of Susan's ability to stay with us on this call. So I just want to turn it over to you, Susan. Do you have any final words or a call to action that you want to share?
all of you for the continuous efforts of fighting the great crisis bigger than all of us that divinity will create the new path for. I appreciate all of you for everything that you continue to do. For anything that I can do for you, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Living life is an example. So
Thank you. Well, we appreciate your regular contributions here at the Amplified Silence
You have
podcast.
minute remaining.
And I look forward to hearing from you some more. All right, Susan Brown, thanks so much. Thanks, Alex.
Look at these unicorn pens. Can you all see these?
Whoa.
They all have little faces and little unicorn horns. And she sent me 24 of them, one for every person at the party in different colors. Because my birthday needed to be special. 20 years behind bars, and my birthday needed to be special. I'm just saying.
Definitely. Well, I think one of the things that I love most about this type of work is that I keep finding great people through the people who I already know. And you've got these people that we're meeting out here, they're just trying to be heard. And in there, they're touching people's lives. They're absolutely positively impacting the culture around them so that it's less violent. They're using all the tools at their disposal to really do everything they can at an organic level. So I'm really glad that everyone's willing to come out here together and support and meet them and ensure for them that there is a consistent spot that they can rely on to get their stories out, because we've got a lot more stories to hear.
They've made hell beautiful.
Say that again, I didn't catch it.
They've made hell beautiful. That is a triumph of the human spirit if I've ever heard it.
Can I ask you about Maine? Is second look legislation on the table in Maine, or is that
No, not yet. That is the only New England state where we don't currently have a resentencing bill, but Maine is on my list. But also Maine in solitary confinement is somebody that everybody who's an activist should look into. I'll actually drop a documentary about Maine's solitary confinement usage, but it's one of the most notorious in the country. So I focus on resentencing issues, but in every state, not only do we need that, we have a lot to deal with while people are in there.
Ms. Bailey, people in this room are often coming to the conversation at different levels with different experiences. For people like myself who comes in thinking, well, I'm just an advocate. I don't know how to change laws. I don't know how to draft a bill. I can barely send an email. What can I expect? What can I do and what can I reasonably expect at this entry level of advocacy? Where can I make a difference?
Well, the first thing that I would say is that there's really no entry level of advocacy. I mean, I saw a woman pass a law within 5 years that brought her husband home in Virginia. I mean, I have seen family members turn into lawyers. I mean, like legit lawyers, like overnight. My family did it. And so the drive in people who are directly impacted by this work is incredible. But the first thing that I would say is that if you're nervous, this is a great space because you can find a friend here and the two of you can go together, attend meetings, ask questions. There are no stupid questions. Reach out to experts. Believe me, we want to talk to you. I know I certainly do. I can't speak for everybody, but I certainly do. You can reach out to me with your questions. I can send you information, state specific or national. And, you know, we can help you draft bills. We can help you explain bills. And before you know it, a year later, you know, Susan Brown is in the room. I don't even need to be here. So, it might be daunting at first, but start with community. That's the best place to start.
Could you give advice to someone like myself who's trying to figure out how to how to begin organizing. One of the things that I noticed in this type of work, something that you may have been hinting on earlier, there are like 1 million nonprofits, and it just feels like that's not what we need anymore. It feels like the tools are here, the resources that we're going to need to make the change are here. How do we begin to attract people to this issue, besides just word of mouth, my word of mouth?
If you have a faith community, ask your pastor to say a few words from the pulpit. I actually encourage people to do one of my favorite things, which is called the treasure chest. It's an organizing exercise. And all the people you're in a room with, just list 3 things that you're good at. Doesn't have to be organizing specific, just 3 things that you're good at. I have a friend, she's a great cook, and all she ever did was bring food to long rallies. She fed people. And the reason people were able to stay on picket lines and things like that was because she always made sure they were fed. That was her talent. That was her offer to the movement. So there's no gift too random or too small. I think people think that they have to do this massive thing in order to make a difference. But I mean, the thing is, Kyle, and I've said this to you before, you're already doing that. Like, we're here. The people in this room are here. I think the thing that you do, which I think is also very important, is that you're consistent. People lose hope and then they'll give up for a time, and you don't do that. You're here week in and week out. And then people, when they know they can depend, they come and they stay. But the recipe for trust is when your words match your actions over time. And a lot of people in this space have been let down for a lot of years. And so there's always sort of this test period at the beginning that I find that's difficult. But don't go away. Don't give up, because that's how we're going to make this change at small and large levels. I mean, you're already doing it. Amplified silence is awesome. And I'm so glad that you've created this space and that you always ask me to be here.
Thanks. I would love to just end it right there. That was a great stopping point. But I'm going to ask, does anyone else have any questions that they'd like to present to Alex Bailey?
Go ahead, Cynthia.
No pressure.
Yeah, well, I wasn't sure if anybody had said anything or not. Yes, I agree with you on so many things. Like what an impressive human being you are. I am so grateful you exist.
Thank you.
And the love that you and Susan obviously have for each other. I mean, oh my goodness, those unicorns are freaking adorable. Like, I'm over here going, would you look at this little?
I know, right?
My friend Cynthia always gets choked up on this type of.
No.
I have a podcast where she highlights people that are doing things that are specifically changing the world, and it's broad, but it's targeted. Like, everyone's got a very unique lane in which they change the world. So I would love to come to that. Did I cut you off, Cynthia? You did.
Yeah, but that's okay because it's your meeting.
Well, no, carry on. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
You will do as you please, sir.
No, go ahead. You have a question?
Yeah, speaking specifically to the second look legislation that you were discussing earlier, because I noticed that a lot of that language was about people who could potentially reoffend, and I would say, like in the case of Susan Brown, she was never dangerous in the first place.
Agreed.
So my question is there language in there that sort of prioritizes, domestic violence, potential circumstances that would make it seem that the person was never really dangerous in the first place, but was just responding to a bad situation?
Yes. So we have a section in the bill which enumerates things that the judge shall consider. And shall in legal speak is a requirement of consideration. With domestic violence, human trafficking, and writs of innocence being 3 of them. There are many others, but yes, that is specifically enumerated in the bill. And quite frankly, I think when all is said and done, I believe that Susan will receive a second look. And quite frankly, I think she is deserving of an apology from the state. And I know many people who I feel fall into that category, because it's also worth noting that Michigan is the 2nd highest felony murder state. States where you go to prison as if you committed the crime, but you didn't. Your physical presence was sufficient to give you a life without the possibility of parole sentence, which is its own miscarriage of justice, which is its own lack of balance in the system, and actually is the type of law that takes all proportionality out of the system. So I think that there are a lot of people, I mean, you know, and like Paula Kinsu is here, who's been fighting for her husband's innocence for years and years at this juncture. I think that there are a lot of people where this law will work well, because what will come to the fore is what their case will bring to the fore is a massive question of how the system is being used, period. And that's what I'm hoping Second Look opens, not only brings people home, but also offers that opening to that conversation that you're identifying, Cynthia.
Thank you so much. I love you so much. I'm so
And you know, you have the same name as my mother, so good name. I like Cynthia's of the world.
You are a daughter of the moon.
Tom up next. Did you have a question, Tom, or a response?
Yes. Alexandra, is there any current legislation proposed in the Massachusetts Senate or the House on second sentencing?
Yes, so I am currently drafting a second look bill for Massachusetts. There is also a repeal of life without the possibility of parole bill that will be going forward this legislative session. Kyle, if you'll connect Tom and I via email, I can connect you with the coalition in Massachusetts. They're called CELWOP, CELWOP. They are longtime partners of the Sentencing Project, and we are currently in discussions of a second look bill. So your input is right on time.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like that information. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have questions, thoughts, reflections? Diana, oh, you want me to connect you through email, Diana?
Yes, please, for Massachusetts bills. Thank you.
Gotcha. Well, we have 10 minutes to go. Barring any questions or burning calls to action, which I'll find a way to slide in, just come back 2 Wednesdays from now. I'm all up for having a meeting end early. That's always nice. Does anyone have any final? Okay, Blue.
Well, I have a question for you, Kyle, and
Sure.
I just wanted to check in about how the move has been going. I know it's really put a strain on you and you trying to make everything happen. I know you're only one person and that it's all a cooperative act, but I know that moving was hard and that, you know, things were going a little rough. So I just want to make sure that you're doing all right.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. I have recently relocated here to the state where the majority of the people who I interact with that are incarcerated are housed in. So it's a very challenging and emotional experience to be this close to people that you love, that you're this dedicated to helping, and it still feels so distant, as well as just the general elements that are often present with housing instability for people who have gotten out of prison. Anyone who knows me knows that I've certainly dealt with that in my history, but things feel really good. Things tend to be stabilizing right now, and I feel more confident about the work than ever before. I'm glad that I'm not the person who's really doing the work, and that I'm not the one who's channeling my stories and having to survive this environment and try to get my story out. A lot happier to just be the conduit right now, and really grateful for you all showing up and allowing me to be that.
Well, I'll be in Michigan in November, so we can hang out.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to it. All right, everyone. I'm going to get ready to close the meeting here. I'm going to check the chat as well and just see if I missed anything. If I missed you or something that you need, stick around. For those who don't know, we meet on the first and the third Wednesday of each month at 7 o'clock. And the first and third Wednesday at 7 o'clock. And those conversations are intended to be educational and informative. And I hope that you found tonight's meeting to be that. If there's anything that you need from me, just email me. I love you all. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Lovely to meet you all.
Thanks so much, Ms. Bailey. See you
Bye.
all.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you so much.
Good night, everybody.
See y'all.
And take care.